Now, nearly half of small UK charities focused on helping the world's poorest people could close in the next year because of cuts in funding. A report from the Small International Charities Development Network warns despite an increase in demand during the pandemic, the majority are not eligible to apply for the UK government coronavirus Community Support Fund. I'm now joined by Joe Ashbridge, who is the founder of the architecture charity AzuKo, and also member of the Small International Development Charities Network, and also the development director at Forgotten Women, Lucy Ray. Welcome to you both. And Joe, to you first, maybe. Just explain what the problem is here, this impact on small charities working abroad.
Well, we conducted a survey with our members, small UK registered charities that operate overseas, supporting some of the world's poorest and most vulnerable communities. 89% of those are responding to COVID-19 directly, and 3/4 have seen increased demand for their services since lockdown. Unfortunately, they've also seen a dramatic decrease to funding. As you mentioned, they have not been eligible for the government support package for charities, and many other funders, including trusts and foundations, which they rely heavily on, have amended their giving criteria to only support projects delivered in the UK. So it's been a very challenging time for them. And we really need to raise the profile of these vital charities so that they can continue to provide their services to the world's most vulnerable.
Yeah, and Lucy, I should just say your charity, Forgotten Women, is a charity for women in crisis, essentially, victims of poverty and abuse. And the COVID pandemic has increased demand for your charity, I'm sure, and your services, and yet COVID means a reduction in your income. It's a curious situation, isn't it?
Absolutely. We work in some of the poorest countries in the world, Yemen, Malawi, for example, who are suffering sort of some of the biggest humanitarian crises, of the century, and then to have this pandemic hit them as well. And we've seen ourselves since March a 22% decrease in cancellations of our standing orders. So where this money goes to the end user who is already in desperate need, that funding is cut, plus they're experiencing the pandemic, so it's needed even more within those countries.
Joe, you think, or your research suggests, a number will have to close. I suppose the question has to be, do you accept that the UK and other countries are needing at the moment to spend taxpayers' money first and foremost on saving people's jobs here and loans to industry? And, there is great need domestically at the moment. Do you accept that?
There is great need here in the UK. We recognise that there is deprivation here as well. It is important to remember, though, that this pandemic is not over anywhere until it's over everywhere. So we do need to support those communities overseas that are already living in abject poverty. As we understand, the pandemic will affect those who are already living in poverty the most. So we are calling the government and the public to continue to support these charities which support the most vulnerable.
And Lucy, what would you say to the government? How would you put your case to the government at a time when people, if they are giving, there's been a lot of giving to the NHS, clearly there's been a lot of giving to care charities in this country. What would your appeal be to the government, Lucy?
Well, absolutely. As Joe said, the people that are in abject poverty need us and need us the most now. They're suffering, and until the pandemic and the coronavirus is gone everywhere, it's still here, and we need that support. We work front line, and at the moment our front lines are struggling, and we just, as smaller charities, we can't access those bigger funding pools. We're overlooked because we're not seen as the bigger ones that have been around for many years and do great work, but we are frontline workers, and the people where we're working desperately need our assistance now.
Yeah, and Joe, I mean, it must be very difficult to be doing the work you're doing anyway with COVID-19, I mean, around the world. But just explain your charity and the work it does. How will it impact you, and are you threatened with closure?
So AzuKo is an architecture charity, and we work to improve living conditions both here in the UK and in Bangladesh. And when the crisis hit, it demanded that we respond to it. Over the last 4 months, we've been working very closely with our local partner in Bangladesh to deliver vital hygiene supplies. We're supporting a community of around 27,000 individuals in the northwest of the country, and have delivered over 2,500 hygiene packs for the most vulnerable families there. We are determined to stay open and operational and serve our communities there. But it has been, like many small charities, it has been a really difficult time. We haven't been able to access any government funding, and we have very much relied on the British public and individual giving to ensure that we can stay open and serve those communities.
Yeah, and Lucy, is yours one of the charities that is threatened by this?
Absolutely. We are based in Bangladesh ourselves, Pakistan, Yemen, Malawi. We're seeing that we're having to hold back some of the work that's taking place in the likes of Pakistan and Bangladesh, because we just need to be able to access those funds. And, you know, for us to have to put any hold on any of our operations is devastating.
Okay, Joe and Lucy, we wish you luck. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Mark.